Good morning and welcome again to Dojo Live this beautiful Tuesday, April 11th, 2023. My name is Kim Lantis and it's my pleasure, as always, to be co-hosting along with America Guerrero today.
Hey.
Hi, Ame. Hi.
Hey, Pierce. Hey, Kim.
Hi. And yes, Pierce Healy, who is the CEO and co-founder of Zelta. Pierce, thank you so much for joining us today all the way from New York. How are you doing?
Yeah, great. No, thanks for having me, guys. Excited to chat.
Yes, it's going to be a great conversation. Another AI-themed conversation. That is definitely the word of these last few weeks, these last few days, and I don't think that it's going to be going anywhere. But today's application is going to be diving in specifically to understanding our customers and what that means for product development. But before we dive into the topic of conversation, we would really like to get to know you a bit better, Pierce. If you could please real quickly tell us your story and your passion and sort of what's led up to co-founding Zelta. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, as we talked about before the show, and you can hear from my accent, I'm not originally from New York.
And it's not Australia either.
Originally from Ireland, across the pond, moved to the US about 6 years ago, and recently moved to New York within the last year. So enjoying it so far. It's a great city. So before kind of starting Zelta, really we started the company within the last year, so we're a pretty early company, but riding the wave of AI right now. Before Zelta, I was previously a management consultant. So I was at McKinsey most recently for 3 years, and then Deloitte before that. I also spent time working as a product manager in between that. But really spent my career, to be honest, helping companies to firstly understand their customers from the various sources of data they might have, and then use that data to try and be more efficient or try and make their customers more happy. So that was my life before Zelta, and really kind of was part of the building blocks, I guess, to what we're doing now.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. I think so many times the stories that we hear here of our founders and the CEOs of companies, it's always or almost always based on their past experience or a need that they've discovered because of those experiences. So what is Zelta, excuse me? What's the problem that you're solving?
Yeah, so I'd say it's twofold what we're trying to do. I'd say firstly, it's building a platform to house qualitative feedback from customers. So there's definitely some solutions on the market today that do this, but I'd say generally speaking, when you look at software product teams, they're still mainly working in spreadsheets or PowerPoint decks or weekly meetings. They tend to not be too structured with how they actually consider qualitative feedback. And it's interesting because if you kind of take the parallel on the quantitative side, the market's definitely a lot more mature. So if you look at any software company, they'll definitely use something like Mixpanel or Amplitude to track kind of what their users are doing within their application. But the qualitative side of the equation, why users are acting this way or what users need or how our users differ in terms of kind of their pain points, etc. That side is a little bit more anecdotal, ad hoc, tends to be kind of siloed.
Go with your gut.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd say kind of firstly, it's really about bringing structure to how qualitative feedback is brought together from all the various different sources. And then particularly in our case, it's using AI to actually automatically categorize and understand that data. Because I think the reason that until now that has been so siloed and been so anecdotal is that qualitative data in nature is very unstructured. So, qualitative data could be an interview like this, right, where we're recording it and now we're talking about, what our company's pain points are or what we're looking for in a solution. It could be a survey, it could be a tweet online. In Zelta's case particularly, it's sales calls, customer success calls. It's all these data sources that really up until recently maybe didn't even exist in a digital format because we were having these talks in person. And if they did, were difficult to actually kind of automatically pull insights from because, it's a text back and forth that is hard
Heck,
for
sometimes even as people, it's challenging for us to make sure that we're
yes.
picking up on the true meaning behind what's happening around us, right? That's
Yes.
absolutely fantastic. And it's interesting to dive into this and see what AI is doing about it. So thank you. The conversation for today, or the topic for today, is going to be...
Sorry, I was thinking about the product and some questions that I have. So the topic of today's show is AI customer understanding, reinventing SaaS product development. How can companies use AI to understand their customers more deeply and prioritize their product roadmap with confidence? So please share with us why this topic is important for today's show.
For sure. I think what could be interesting to do is maybe just talk about, how product development exists today in a typical SaaS company, and how we think it will exist in the future. Today, product team in a SaaS company is responsible for putting things in the roadmap that are going to drive the highest amount of revenue for the company. In order to do that, they are coalescing a lot of different sources of data. A huge one is going to be feedback from sales teams or success teams or the support center who are checking how happy customers are. They'll also do primary research themselves, where they're actually setting up customer interviews or doing surveys. And really, they're responsible for bringing it all together and trying to pull out of all that data what the most important things they should be focused on building for the next year or next 5 years. Today, that's a very manual process. And when it comes to the actual kind of most important data, around where customers are actually expressing to salespeople what their needs are, it's coming to the product team secondhand. So the sales team might be putting feedback tickets into their CRM. They might be having a weekly meeting where they share what their opinion is based on their existing customers. And for the product team, that's a problem because, first of all, they're not getting this unbiased source from, the actual customer. They're getting a secondhand account of it that might be tainted by, whatever the sales org's goals are for that quarter. And secondly, in a lot of cases, they just simply might not get the data, right? Because as an account manager or salesperson, your job is to actually go and close deals. Reporting feedback to the product team is a secondary activity that, you might not have time for in any given week. So lots of problems there in the kind of current, existing way of product development SaaS. In the future, how we see it looking with kind of Zelta being the linchpin for this is that instead of having to have all these teams send feedback to the product team, but the product team is getting a live stream of qualitative feedback from all the various sources that exist. And so we've just started to see most SaaS companies now will likely record sales calls. I think it's probably more common at, say, the more mid-market, but now seeing as well enterprise start to do this. But if we project out 3 to 5 years, we almost see that every interaction that a company has with a customer will be recorded. If it's a call, it'll be recorded. If it's an email, it'll be tracked. So much insight in that data that really companies need to be tracking all of it. And once that's then tracked from the sources that it's actually created, we can use AI to basically make sense of all that data for the product team, so that they're not having to rely on, having these discussions with all the various different groups. They can get this unfiltered source of truth on what customers' needs are.
I love it. I guess I want to take it in the same thread and talking specifically about the product teams. My question is, and I've never built a product, I've never been a product manager, but how is it this conversation, or even helping convince people as to why this matters, right? Because sometimes what we design or what we think is going to be great isn't even doable yet, or maybe we're one-track minded, or we want to finish this first. I mean, how can we get to the heart of why this matters? Why should I care? And what are the benefits of this type of analysis?
Yeah, I mean, it's for us, actually, I think we see it as like a 3-part problem for us to solve. The first of which is kind of what I specifically talked about there, basically analyzing the data, right? That's like step 1, basically, what do we need to do? Step 2 then is we're going to do something about it. So in this case, it's like we're going to build some certain features or plan new products that we're going to do to serve these pain points. And the third step is actually tracking the effectiveness of those things that we've built, right? And longer term for Zelta, we see ourselves owning kind of those 3 steps altogether. So we're at like step 1 right now. Our roadmap will take us, eventually we're going to build in basically a connection between the feedback and what we actually end up building, and then ultimately measuring the success of those things once released. So it's that full feedback.
Zelta's AI developed your roadmap for yourself.
Exactly. So it's funny. I think it's one of for any company that can be a user of their own product, it's an incredible flywheel. And for us, it makes demos even more interesting because we demo with our own data. And for example, if this was a sales call and you asked me, do you integrate with XYZ, I'd be able to say, well, let me see how many people have asked for it and kind of show you within the application. And then also, if tomorrow we logged on, you would be added in as a line item there of like, ask for integration.
The XYZ integrator count, like people are asking for this. It makes sense. I love that. So one of the things we I would like to know exactly how this is working, how you're tapping into this AI, and also I'm guessing this NLP, maybe natural language processing component. We're talking about this qualitative side, right? Not just the quantitative side. And when it comes to language in particular, I'm curious as how this works in terms of the nuances of language, right? So I could say something, but I can say it with a sarcastic tone, or in a joking tone, or something like that. How are you able to kind of pick through that with your product and make sure that this was actually, a serious request or a serious comment versus, what we'd be able to pick up on as people versus...
Or technical terms, right? So there are occasions that I'm watching the shows and there are the subtitles, but there are occasions that the guests are saying something like technical and the subtitles, exactly.
Irish versus American.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I would say, it's funny, if we went back even 6 months ago, the technology was very immature for this use case. Even 6 months ago, it was very difficult to take something like a phone call and actually turn that into structured data. For the reasons you guys mentioned there of like, different words meaning different things and different tone of voice, etc. But also even like, we'll talk about something 10 minutes into this call that might have been related to something we talked about at the start. So you have this problem with a call whereby you need to retain this context the whole way through. So it's actually an extremely difficult data set to work with. And when we first started out with Zelta, we had, we required a lot of manual review on our part and really kind of bespoke approaches to different customers to make it work. And really, to be honest, just in the last 6 months, the improvement in the underlying models we use is just absolutely incredible for us to see. It's I think 2 huge step changes already in the last 6 months that I think anyone who's interested in AI is probably aware of. Now we use GPT-4, the latest model from OpenAI, in conjunction with a few other large language models. It's one of the things as a company within the generative AI space, you need to understand which model suits which purpose, because they all have different costs, different efficiency levels, different kind of specific benefits they have for certain use cases. So for us, our tech stack is like a kind of cocktail of different AI models for different purposes. And then we layer on top of that some proprietary tech as well to bring it all together. But really, I'd say just kind of the key point is that it's genuinely only possible in the last, I think, 3 to 6 months to even think about doing something like we're doing today.
That's mind-blowing. I think just a few weeks ago, and I can't even remember exactly which guest or which show it was, but it was also on AI, and he had said something to the effect, and I might be wrong, but something about AI being able to double its capacities every like 3 months or something like that, which is just, absolutely exponential. And I think what you're saying in terms of speed and just this most recent capability kind of really fits in line with that. Is that it's your experience as well? Are you on board with that assessment?
Yeah, I think it's hard to see the current pace continuing because of how fast it's been this year. But certainly I think the last 6 months, since like end of last year. It's been incredible pace. I think we are at the point now where any new company that's starting up is going to be thinking about this as like the core linchpin for their products, right? It's almost a totally new way to build software in some ways. So I think great benefit to being early if you're trying to adopt this tech, because you can essentially think from first principles and have everything built future focused around, where this is going to be. So that's definitely been something that's been key for us.
I'm
For sure.
curious about how it works with healthcare companies. For example, I know that there are SaaS that they need some interaction with their users, but physically. They need to do like the roadmap, studying and discovering the needs with the people, but in person. Is that a possibility that I can record conversations, then upload that conversation with your tool? Or how does it work? Can you apply this technology with this case?
It's a great point, and we actually have started specifically doing that. So we sometimes have in-person meetings, and it was kind of funny for us because once we started using our own product and seeing how much value comes from using the recordings, we all of a sudden started to think, well, if we do this in person, we're not going to have the data. So we actually, ourselves had to kind of solve that problem. So we do actually record them in person now if people are willing. I think it's kind of interesting if we look kind of future in-person meetings might take up a kind of a different meaning. It might be more of something that we do for social purposes than purely information sharing. But yeah, it's certainly, once it's recorded, we can add it to the data set.
But it's quite interesting, this idea of in-person meetings and this distinct, how you distinguish, what's traditionally done on camera versus in person, and the socialization component. I mean, as people, that socialization component isn't going to change, right? And actually, it's a very critical component of business, right? The ability to establish this type of trust. And I think there's an absolute space for that and kind of need for that. How do you feel about this idea, though? How do we balance this idea of being intrusive, or how do you approach that everything's being recorded, everything's being analyzed? How is this received? Do you find that there's maybe two camps or people who are in the middle? What does this look like?
Yeah, I think at this second, it's fair to say there is 2 or 3 camps. There's the people that are used to it, the people who are kind of getting to grips with it, and then the people who probably don't like it, I think. And I'd say, even ourselves, it's like, it's not that long ago that I probably would have been like a little bit uncomfortable with the call being recorded, but it's kind of becoming the default position now, I would say. But, we're living in this world where we just assume everything is going to be tracked, right? Now, a lot of questions around privacy, of course, which we could get into kind of how we think about that. But we're probably seeing that, just as we talk to customers, the idea is settling in that, it's there's too much value in recording things to I guess not do it.
For sure.
Yeah.
If we could dive a bit more into the qualitative versus quantitative, I think quantitative has always been easier, right, for anyone and everyone to kind of understand. Numbers make sense to us. The qualitative side, not so much. So let's talk about maybe some use cases or some examples. What is this qualitative data that we're polling, that we're compiling, and what are some of the conclusions that have been drawn, and how have companies actually been able to utilize this to, as you say, develop their product roadmaps with confidence, and the impact that has had? I know that we're still, the third piece of the puzzle here, that impact, but are we starting to see some of this take place now?
Yeah. So how we think about it, and basically how our product works, is it looks for examples where customers have mentioned a feature request, that they've talked about a pain point related to what your product does, that they've expressed interest in a certain use case, or if you have a product which has maybe multiple sub products, that they're talking about one of those, either on a call or in a email or whatever else you're tracking. So kind of first passes were basically just quantifying the number of people that have asked about similar things within those buckets. So something very simple. 25 people have asked about a Slack integration last month. So the first pass is really just like literally just tallying up, how many people are talking about those different things, which in and of itself is incredibly powerful. And today is very manual process to try and do that in a live way. The second kind of aspect of this then is to, rather than just purely tally up, is to add some kind of insight or recommendation on top. And I think this is kind of particularly interesting where kind of generative AI comes in, as opposed to kind of say more traditional NLP analysis. To give you kind of an example, we have one customer who is a streaming platform, and they had a lot of conversation about adding a slider as a feature request. And basically, in our early version of the product, slider kept coming up, right? And that was going to the top of the list of slider. After we made some model improvements and started to experiment with different ways of doing things, the AI actually changed its recommendation from being slider to being users want to rewind, right? And it's kind of subtle, but basically by that change, it's inferring what the actual need is as opposed to what the customer is specifically saying, which is today kind of what the product manager should be doing when they're reading that data. So that's kind of an example where I think like the technology maturing has like brought us to this new level of basically inference rather than just purely tracking. And I think the next level beyond that then is that the AI is actually suggesting the thing that you should build, right? So it's saying, okay, we've found this need for somebody to rewind. It knows enough about our product to say that in order to do that, we need to do X, Y, and Z, and actually then write that user story, for example. So it's continuing to kind of layer on top of this and just really just kind of automate more and more of the process around actually translating user needs into features.
Yeah. And so what I see here is this help in the decision-making process, right? It's not this override. It's not this end all. It's like a guidance counselor.
Yeah. I'm also imagining, for example, me having a sales call. Everything is being recorded and there are some words that the technology is identifying for me later make some decisions. But what about in real time? I'm having the sales call and then the technology is telling me, hey, you should ask this, or you should say something like that. Or is that something that is happening now? Or do you say that that is like the next step?
Yeah, it's a great point. That is definitely something we want to do. Is basically add questions to the script, because ultimately, the better the data that comes in, the better the results we're going to get out. And so we definitely see differences with our customers in how interesting the results are, depending on, I guess, how well written their sales scripts are. So that is definitely something. I think it's where we sit right now. We're very specifically focused on selling to the product team. Sales are a huge stakeholder in terms of kind of making our product work, but they're not our direct customer. But down the line, I would say kind of we see this as being something that brings sales and product together under one roof. So it's like if they have an agreed upon source of truth of this is how we are going to track our customer needs, becomes easier for both of them to collaborate going forward. So down the line, I think we might build in kind of to your question there, kind of maybe some more specific things that the sales group might use as well, but not today.
Yeah, but I think it's a really interesting idea, at least this unifying different camps for a common goal. I mean, obviously the sales team their main goal is to get clients, and then the product team is to like develop this product that clients want to keep using, right? But they're not mutually exclusive. They're very important. In terms of that as people, I mean, this conversation came up a while ago, just recently on dojo.live as well, and that's the importance of prompt engineering, right? Yeah. So when it comes with AI and the chat GPT and those types of things, the types of questions we're saying or the information that we're providing is going to determine the quality of what's being produced for us. So is this something that your prompt engineering is a skill set that all of the individuals in the software development, product process are required to understand. I mean, as a salesperson, even though your product isn't giving me my tips of how to sell better, I can engineer my questions and train myself of how to ask better questions that are going to ultimately make the entire company better for it. I mean, can we talk to the skill set a little?
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic, I think. So I would say one thing up front, kind of without getting too in the weeds technically, there's two possible futures for how we use these models. One is that we do prompt engineering, as you mentioned there, where basically, we're having to get very good at understanding how we tell the AI what to do. It's definitely going to be a big part of a lot of the future. But another possible way to use these models is what's called fine tuning, which is where you take the foundational model and train it on a specific data set that is for some certain task. And then it kind of operates then almost like a traditional AI, where it's just taking data in and then giving a result without kind of actually having a prompt. And it's possible we have both of those kind of ways of using this AI in the future. So that's one thing I would say. On the prompt engineering side specifically, though, a couple of things interesting there. I'd say it's a totally new way of thinking about software engineering, because you are asking the computer to do things in natural language. And it's almost, I think, a real power up for anyone who has a kind of mathematical or logical mind, but maybe just has never sat down and like learned code or learned the syntax behind some coding language. Because it operates in the same way as a kind of engineering challenge would, but you're able to essentially code it in natural language. So I think it really expands the remit of who might be involved in product development in the future. Even for us internally, it's interesting. We treat our prompts separate to the rest of the code base. So the prompts that actually are feeding the results is something that we are incredibly focused on making sure are optimized, because it's really kind of a key part of the whole product. And because it's natural language, we can bring everybody to the table on that challenge. And it's not having to describe from customer facing go-to-market teams to engineering. We can all basically input and say, is this really solving the problem that we set out to solve? Is there another way we can do this? When it comes to prompt engineering, the key thing is you need to link them all together. So it's like, you could have 6 different ones that are jigsaw pieces that eventually give you your answer, and there's multiple ways to do it. And it's very interesting, kind of us as a company, just kind of how we're collaborating on that now.
Of course, to get to the rewind rather than the slider, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about your people, about Zelta's employees, about the culture that you're building, the people who are building this product. What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so we've 4 full-time people right now, and we've an intern starting next week, and we have a part-time designer. So we've got a kind of a 6-person team all over working this problem. The 3 founders are all Irish, actually. We all knew each other through one way or another, and we're in the US and decided to get together to do this. And so there's definitely an Irish flavor to everything to do with Zelta as a result. Culture-wise, I think it's interesting. We're right now hybrid between in-person and remote. We have 3 remote, 3 in-person. I think as much as any other company, we're trying to work out the best way to run that. There's definitely, I think, benefits to both. And I think where possible, we probably say work in person, but the reality of the modern world is we all have to embrace remote. So we have both of those, let's say, going on. Looking forward. Beyond that, I think culture-wise, I mean, I'd say one key thing is we're all very competitive. I think most founders are competitive. Most people who are ambitious are competitive, but that's definitely something that we embrace and don't really shy away from. I think we have some competitors in the market, and we do see them as competitors who we need to beat. That's kind of something that I think when we bring people on, they have to be comfortable with. That's just the way we think about it. But other than that, I think, really fun culture. You know, we all have a great time. We work hard, but it's been incredibly exciting to build in this space. So I think we're all enjoying it.
Sorry, my computer froze for just a moment. That's great. And I love the competitive spirit. I think it actually leans really heavily into the qualitative side that you and Zelta are tapping into, right? It reminds me of, if we want to think about traditional sports and watching, the team that you're going to play against and see how they play and what you can do and, that type of analysis and another way that you can apply your own product to the market. I love it. Well, thank you so much. We're at the end of our half hour today, but Pierce, it's been lovely to meet you, to get to know you, to get to know more about Zelta. We wish you and your company nothing but success in this next year and the years to follow.
Fantastic. No, thanks for having me, guys.
Yes, thank you. Stick around for just a minute as we do go off air. Before we go off air, I'd like to tell our viewers that this is actually the only show that we've got lined up this week. But hey, what a great show to have. Do catch us on Monday at 10 o'clock Pacific for a recap show where we'll kind of talk about Pierce's show and, of course, introduce you a bit more in depth to next week's conversations. Next week, we do have 2 shows lined up with Adaptive and Big Leaf. So we'll go ahead and catch those. That would be on Tuesday and Wednesday. All right. So thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your week and talk to you soon. Bye for now.